when people have hypothyroidism, they're often very sensitive to caffeine because they clear the caffeine slower. The thyroid is responsible for a lot of really internal, important biological functions. And now it creates this, again, like this dichotomy situation because people with hypothyroidism have low energy. So they tend to self-medicate with caffeine, then they get more side effects from the caffeine. And it's either going, do I want to be anxious or tired?
Do you have clients like that even though there are certain medications that could be useful for them, maybe it's, I don't know, even fish oil or metformin, they're just so sensitive to these meds or supplements from like a digestive or autoimmune standpoint. Do you have clients like this?
Yeah. So I can't diagnose anything, obviously, but when it comes to these kind of issues, you see a lot of patterns come up because one of the blessings I've had in my career kind of taking off in this space is that I tend to get more troubleshooting cases. And I like that because they're more difficult, they're more challenging. I tend to get people coming to me when they're like, I've seen everyone, I've seen all these people, no one can solve this, but I thought I'd just run it by you. And then we tend to get to the bottom of it. And that I really enjoy that because that's where you learn a lot. But you definitely see patterns because people think they're unique, that people aren't unique. They may be in a small bucket, but they're in a bucket. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to people getting side effects from medication, so I think, and again, I'm biased, but I've chosen my biases. I'm from an optimization standpoint, so from a healthy individual standpoint, if people are sick and they need medications and they need to go to a medical doctor, and that's a entirely different discussion. But from a health optimization standpoint, I think that health should be optimized, and I don't have anything bad to say about anyone, and I will never do that professionally, but I'm not I'm neutral towards the work of Gary Brecker. Not a huge fan of a lot of people's work, but one thing that he really correctly says is that the most important thing for human health is amino acids, essential fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients. So nutrients for the human body. A long time ago, they made a list of all the essential nutrients for the human body. And it's not all of them, but they basically put this umbrella term around, again, all the amino acids, omega-3, 6, and 9, all the vitamins, minerals we've identified, and then phytonutrients and flavonoids. And there's this kind of big list. I don't know what the number is, but it's deemed like all the essential nutrients to the human body. I think, and this is just my approach that underlies a lot of what I do, is that human health should be able to be optimized, assuming someone is healthy and wants to maintain health, by maintaining good diet and lifestyle practices, optimizing their intake of all the essential nutrients the body needs to do what it does. And also in this day and age, and this is my take on this in terms of my biases, sometimes that also involves the need to optimize hormone production, because I think that there's a lot of stuff in the environment that's unavoidable. We were talking about air quality here before. These things are not avoidable. I mean, unless you go and live on a tropical island somewhere, then maybe. But that's how I look at it. So I like things that are bioidentical or essential to the human body, and then focusing on what we do, not what we take. So I think that all medications cause side effects, and you can't really hide from that. So for example, people often talk about tadalafil, and I don't want to freak anyone out about not taking tadalafil. Tadalafil absolutely has its place. It is massively beneficial, but systemically inhibiting PDE5 does stuff outside of your dick. Like it does other things. For example, it reduces clearance of cortisol. We don't fully understand the outcomes of that because no one's looked into it. So medications basically when you take a medication and you're either increasing something or inhibiting something, which tends to be what these medications do, you create a favorable outcome in the department that you're hoping to improve. But you can also create issues in other departments because the body is this series of interconnected systems, which is what Paul Chek talks about. So in the case of someone who's sick, the pros outweigh the cons. Because if we're in a situation being like, well, this medication causes side effects, but if we don't treat the underlying issue, they're going to be dead, which is the ultimate problem. So if we can prevent death, then the side effects that it can cause or does cause are less problematic. And the biggest example of that, which I don't have any educated opinions on cancer, but chemotherapy is the best example of that. Will kill the cancer. Everything else that comes with it is not as bad as the death from the cancer, and people kind of debate that. Again, I have no stance on chemotherapy. So when it comes to medications, people need to accept that all medications will have some degree of unfavorable outcome. Now, when it comes to people who get side effects from all medications, so basically like cases like you, I use the example, like if something causes a side effect, you're going to get it. And it's not a placebo effect from reading the package insert or going on Dr. Google and creating that in yourself. It's a legitimate, everything that I create gives me a side effect. And I think that there can be two reasons for this. One is that some people are more self-aware. So we get, if you look at the studies in psychiatry, they say that SSRI antidepressants don't have any effect for 8 weeks. If I gave you 100 milligrams of Zoloft right now and we went out for dinner later, you'd probably go, I feel this, because absolutely it does, because you're more subjectively aware of your baseline, because you're more aware of deviating from that baseline.
Definitely.
So some people are not self-aware when it comes to a lot of things, not just health, but actions, everything. So self-awareness can be a blessing and a curse. I would always look at it and frame this as a blessing because I don't see any reason why self-awareness is not a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
But if someone is getting side effects from all medications and supplements, to me, looking at how the body works, and we're assuming that they're objective side effects now, is that I think that is typically a result of reduced liver clearance of the medication. Because if you take a medication and you can't clear it as efficiently, it means it's going to have a stronger biological effect. So if someone's got hypothyroidism, which if you've had flares of periods where you've had thyroglobulin or antithyroid peroxidase or both elevated, that means that your immune system has attacked your thyroid. So I always use the Game of Thrones analogy for hypothyroidism. And if anyone hasn't seen Game of Thrones, it doesn't spoil it, but also everyone should have seen Game of Thrones, is that if we're looking at the last season, the iconic, very dark episode, the Battle of Winterfell, if you've got your Dothraki army out the front, which is your immune system, and you in this analogy are the castle, is it the castle of Winterfell or are they attacking let's say it's the Battle of Winterfell. So I might be getting that wrong. But in this scenario, you want your Dothraki army to be ready to attack the White Walkers that are coming in. That's what they're there for. That's the ideal situation. And let's say in this analogy, the White Walkers are like, I don't know, pneumonia, contagious disease, like bacterial infections, everything that you want your immune system to defend you from. So if you've got an autoimmune condition, those Dothraki are attacking the castle. They've turned around and they're running at the castle and they're attacking the castle walls. Not ideal. Now, how much damage can the Dothraki do against the castle walls? You know, maybe not a huge amount, but over time they could probably wear down the defenses. But the problem now is that if those White Walkers come in, not only are the Dothraki flanked because they're facing the wrong direction, they've already damaged the castle and they're already pretty gassed because they've constantly been attacking and attacking and attacking. So not only is your body already compromised, but your immune system is distracted and depleted. And this is why people with autoimmune conditions are typically considered immunocompromised. So the problem that we have, if this castle in this instance, or the part of the castle they're attacking is your thyroid, is that thyroid has become damaged. And even if you call the Dothraki off and you resolve the physiological or circumstantial state that was causing the antibodies to flare up, they've done damage to the wall. And you can't go in and rebuild your thyroid. We don't know how to do that yet. Now, potentially bioregulated peptides could be the way to treat that. We don't really know. But if you're in a scenario like that, damage has been done to the thyroid. So the problem that we have here is that the thyroid is responsible for a lot of really internal, important biological functions, particularly the function of the liver. So when people have hypothyroidism, they're often very sensitive to caffeine because they clear the caffeine slower. And now it creates this, again, like this dichotomy situation because people with hypothyroidism have low energy. So they tend to self-medicate with caffeine, then they get more side effects from the caffeine. And it's either going, do I want to be anxious or tired? And they end up in this really tricky state. But in this situation, I would hypothesize, and again, I can't say for sure, but if the thyroid is suboptimal due to damage, even if you've called off the attack from the autoimmune system, it's still been damaged over the years, so it couldn't be functioning optimally, then that could be resulting in reduced liver clearance of these medications.
If you've just started TRT, it is completely normal to feel overwhelmed and confused. There's a lot of new territory to cover, and there is a lot of conflicting information. I wrote TRT 101 so that you can have everything that you need to know in an instruction manual in one place that you can refer back to, that you can have all the questions answered before they even come up. TRT 101 is my best practice approach for TRT from start to finish, and it contains everything that you need to avoid all the challenges and pitfalls that I've seen come up in my clients over the last 5 years. You can check it out via the link below.
I've been thinking about this lately. Obviously, my friends, athletes, they use gear. You know, not all of them, by the way, but a lot of them are bodybuilders, so they need to use gear. And then I had friends come to me and they say, look, I haven't checked my blood work in a while. I'm thinking of doing it. And my first question now is, so will you change your dose if you see anything? And a lot of the time the answer is, hell no.
Yeah.
I'm like, so why go get the blood test then, bro?
Yeah.
They aren't thinking about a decision node. And I was thinking about myself. And I want to know if this is irresponsible. It's been 14 months since I've had a blood test. I haven't changed my dose for, I think it's coming up 11, 12, 13 years, 150 milligrams a week. It always looks the same unless I'm sick in Bali. There was once, because I don't check thyroid every time. There was once my T4 was in range, but at the low end of normal.
Right.
And then those thyroid antibodies in 2017, but every time after I checked it, it was normal. I even did a ultrasound on my thyroid when I saw the antibodies, and it was normal.
No.
So maybe even the test itself was wrong. It could have been if all the other tests were normal.
Could have been a bad day.
Yeah, it could have just been a bad day. So I am asymptomatic. In fact, on the days that I feel good, I'm good. And I know when I'm down, and it's only one thing.
Yeah.
If I've been following everything correctly, every time I just train too hard.
Yeah.
Too hard, too long. It's just my mentality. As soon as I have a day or two off, boom, I'm back. Not just back with subjective well-being. It's also blood pressure, heart rate, all of it. There's like a day when you overtrain, if you've really like dug deep, where your blood pressure gets a little bit high, heart rate gets a bit high, sleep's a bit trash. Take a day off and then you like super compensate.
Yep.
So I guess where I'm at now is, how irresponsible is it of me to just not check my blood work? And I don't know when the next time it is that I'm going to get one, because I'm thinking, if I get this test, am I going to change anything? My answer is absolutely not. I'm living as good as I possibly can. So why get the test?
Yep. Yeah, I completely understand. I think, again, if there's a spectrum of irresponsibility, it's on the spectrum, but it's not high on the spectrum. But that's due to the other confounding factors that you've mentioned, is that you're looking after yourself and all the variables you've kept are the same. If you were not dialed in, if you were, not looking after yourself properly, if you were like in your first couple of years on TRT and you were still getting things dialed in, completely different story. When it comes to how testosterone is scheduled in most countries, you have to get a blood test done every 6 months to continue getting your script. A lot of guys don't like that. From someone who works with the clinics on the back end, it's the best thing in the world because you have to get it done. So it basically forces compliance for the thing that you need to get done to make sure that you're going to be in good health long term. So I like that is the legal requirement. But from a standpoint of looking at someone like yourself, who would be an outlier in terms of how well you look after yourself, most of the guys I know who've been stable on their dose for 5 years, 10 years, and they understand all this stuff, tend to get blood work done every year. And, every year can fluctuate by a few months here or there. The reason why I always recommend people get blood work done every year as a minimum, ideally, and obviously stuff can happen. Sometimes there could be 18 months between blood tests if you're traveling, 2 years, whatever. Not ideal, but fine, is that trends are more important than acute blood tests. Because like you said, if you got a blood test done every year, but one of the blood tests that you got done was just a bad day and you'd done a big workout the day before, which would kind of make the blood test a bit redundant, but let's say you did, is that we could be looking at something to be like, we don't know if this is a trend. We don't know if this is valuable. So if something does happen down the line, it's really helpful to have 5 to 10 years of annual blood testing to be able to be like, has this progression been something that we can pick up looking in hindsight? Or could we be able to see it's kind of like getting your car serviced. Like if you wait until the engine starts smoking or there's a problem or the lights come on, then you could be looking at a bigger bill than if you just taken it into the mechanic every 6 months or 12 months for the minor service. So from an irresponsibility standpoint, it's well within the spectrum of not ideal, but okay. But for the sake of like just being pragmatic and being aware of things in the future, I think getting blood work done every year is a good exercise so that you can put it in the folder so that if something does happen, you can go, here's my blood test from every year. Because when I get clients who like, when they rock up for a consultation, they're like, here's my blood work folder of a blood test every year. I'm like, this makes my job so much easier.
Can imagine, man. You know, if I had to pick one excuse, it's because here the bureaucracy and the assay methodology, it's like 50 years ago, bro. There are certain tests you can't even get that I want. So to start off with, I have to fly to another country to get certain tests. But then I looked at the assay methods, which, by the way, it took me ages to get in contact with the guy who even knew. They're testing in ways, especially thyroid, that I don't think are going to accurately reflect my trends because of where I tested them in the past.
Yeah.
Now, I understand I'm an outlier. Most people are getting blood tests in the country where they grew up and they're still living there. But for people like me that are bouncing around the world, it brings me into the next segue because it's also come up more recently. You've got people comparing numbers around the world, Australia, UK, Europe, America, but they're all using different assay methods. Now there seems to be some sort of standard being formed, like you get the LCMS for the testosterone, the LCMS for the estradiol. That was awesome when I could see that because I noticed that with a regular immunoassay, my testosterone would be 20% higher on the lab than the LCMS.
Yeah.
Which is kind of consistent with what I found on ChatGPT. But now the next thing. Now I'm like, all right, here we go. So people like, I really want your take on this. People like Andrew Wingy are of the belief that testing estradiol in general is a useless test because something's going on in the cell that we can't see. Where are you with this thing where the actual serum levels of these hormones may not even accurately represent what we need anyway?
Yeah, when it comes to serum estradiol levels, the late Dr. John Chrysler used to say that serum estradiol is a proxy for systemic estrogen activity, not just E2, but E1, E3 in the cells. And I think that if people take that number as like a hard number, like a black letter number, and take it as an exact, precise measurement, that can be really confusing because you're like, well, why is my estradiol fluctuating by 50, 60% every time I get a blood test? It's because it's not accurate. It's just measuring the spillover that was in the serum on that day. So when people want to really surgically, precisely optimize their estradiol to a very narrow range, it's a bit of a redundant exercise because you're trying to precisely optimize an inaccurate number, which is just silly. So with that said, there's kind of these two extremes. So that's one extreme. And the other extreme of the argument is don't measure it at all. It's useless. And I kind of sit in the middle. And I think in a lot of cases, the truth is in the middle. I understand full well logistically why it's a nightmare for doctors to measure estradiol when the patients get the blood test before the doctor gets the results. Because the problem is the patient gets the results, they go on ChatGPT, they go on Google, they freak out, they buy some anastrozole from whoever will sell it, and then they end up in this, by the time they actually have the follow-up appointment with the doctor, then everything's just completely gone to shit. That's a real challenge. I get why people do it because they're operating from a space of anxiety. They're making a non-educated reactive decision, and that's part of human nature, but it's a pain. So I get why doctors go, they just don't even measure it because then they can go, okay, well, we've eliminated that problem before it started. I get both of these perspectives. Well, maybe I don't get this one. I get this one, but they're both present. I understand how they happen. The estrogen number is, so in Australia, when people get a blood test, due to how the panels are bundled, whether it's through Medicare or through private, they tend to always, or not always, but like let's say 95% of the time, measure testosterone, and then if you're lucky, SHBG, free testosterone, and estradiol. If you're unlucky, you'll get total testosterone, estradiol. So I'd say I've looked at probably within, maybe 5%, the same amount of estradiol readings as testosterone readings over my 5-year career doing this. And I find the number to be useful when taken with a grain of salt, because I'm looking at it in conjunction with other numbers, like prolactin, particularly the relationship between estradiol, prolactin, cortisol, and if you check it, reverse T3, is useful. And the reason for that is that estrogen, and Ray Peat spoke about this a lot, is that estrogen could also be considered to be somewhat of a stress hormone, because estrogen, like cortisol, is anti-inflammatory, has a lot of anti-inflammatory properties. So what happens is, for example, if the body, let's say someone's got an excess amount of body fat, the reason why there's more aromatase in the fat tissue is because it's protective. So we're in a situation being like, we're often blaming the fire engines for starting the fire. And the fire engines may be annoying. I mean, the sirens are going off and the estrogenic side effects are not ideal, but there is no one who is a genetic over-aromatizer. Everyone who says they're a genetic over-aromatizer is either overweight, drinking too much alcohol, has liver issues, or has a thyroid problem, or their protocol's junk. Like, it's one of those things, or they're taking HCG. So there's always a reason why someone is having an estrogen or estrogenic problem, and it's because their body is out of balance in some way. Because physiological optimal amounts of testosterone delivered in a stable fashion should not cause you to make too much feminizing hormone metabolites. That just doesn't make any sense. If it did, then the healthy 18, 19, 20-year-olds would all need to take an anastrozole because their testosterone levels are peaking, they'd be over-aromatizing. It doesn't make any sense. But if you're taking a testosterone injection every fortnight or every week, you're taking 200 milligrams a week in one bolus dose, you could be getting some side effects. Now, an aromatase inhibitor is not the solution to that, but I understand how people get to that conclusion. It's just the wrong conclusion. So when it comes to measuring it, it comes down to the skill of the practitioner. And Dr. Chrysler, again, used to say there's an art and a science to TRT. And the longer that I do this, the more I realize what that art part is, which is that you have to look at each individual as a not completely unique, but a somewhat unique biochemical individual. There's so much individual biochemical, uniqueness to a human that we have to look at everything individually. And sometimes that estradiol number is useful. I mean, I've seen guys come in to see me for coaching. They've got a free testosterone level at like the top of the range, maybe a little bit above, and they've got an estradiol of like 500, 600, 700 picomole per liter, which I think in the US units is like 150 or so, like a really big number, like a number that is massively disproportionately higher. Even in, looking at being like, yeah, some guys have higher estrogen levels, some guys have lower estrogen levels. It doesn't cause symptoms. I'm talking like double the top of what would be considered high. Like it's blown through the sky. That guy doesn't need an aromatase inhibitor. He needs to get to the root cause of why that's happening. So when it comes to checking for estrogen levels in the blood, you're not checking for the cause of a problem. You're kind of checking for something related to the symptoms of what could be going on. So I think if we're going to say that estrogen is a useless blood measurement because it's not an accurate representation of paracrine hormone activity, which is true, then you could apply that to every blood test. Because you could be like, well, why check LDL? If LDL's got genetic variability, why check that? I mean, it's going to be, why check all the markers? I mean, none of those markers are perfect. If AST and ALT can be jacked up by taking Panadol the night before, or training the day before, then it's a useless measurement. Throw it out. So I get why people have different approaches to it. My initial kind of foray into health coaching was from Chris Kresser, and he had this saying, test, not guess. So I don't see the harm if we're already taking the blood out of the arm. I don't see the harm in running the estrogen panel. It's just how you apply that data that can be problematic.
Daily injections are ideal. If you can really frequently administer something with a very long half-life, you can keep your levels super, super stable. And I think that this is the most beneficial way to do TRT. However, how should TRT be administered? So TRT should be administered as frequently as possible.